All right, so our next session, I'm joined by Len Covello from Engage, and Len, we've had a chance to chat quite a few times. It's great to be back in person, though.
Absolutely.
It's fantastic to be back in person. On our previous chats, we sort of had a bit of a common theme. We talked a lot about redemption, the importance of redemption. We talked a lot about some of the data that you've seen, which I think reinforces pretty much what we all see in our programs, of the importance of redemption and post-redemption behavior. But I wanted to sort of change the conversation on, a different topic today. And what we've heard in this morning's sessions, and we heard it in London as well, is a big focus on relevancy, relevancy of the message, relevancy of your rewards offering, relevancy of your brand, but also the pandemic has sort of laid bare the importance of focusing on a broader constituency amongst our members, not just our, in air quotes, higher spending customers. So whether that's less frequent, whether it's leisure, whether it's non-corporate. When we think about your less frequent members, that theme of less frequent members and more relevancy, what are your thoughts? If I could sort of throw those two topics out to sort of start with, what jumps out for you?
I think on the less frequent members, it's finding additional ways to interact with them. Right? Obviously, I think in the title, the fact that they're using your properties less so than other people, it's where are their day-to-day interactions and getting that data from them. So I think a big piece, it's been a theme this morning and something we'll talk about a little later on as well, is that partnership approach. So working with other partners that have, you're able to have that identifier on a member, but share data obviously in an opt-in approach, but understanding other places that member is so they can interact with your brand through another brand, if that makes sense. Really, like, how do I earn or how do I redeem with a like brand?
So, we heard interesting sort of set of themes we could explore there. I mean, we heard Mark this morning mention about the Aeroplan Starbucks partnership, for example, and we talked a little bit in this morning's sessions about partnerships. I know we've got a data session coming up later, no doubt, we can talk about connecting the dots and things like that. And traditionally, programs have been great at helping to connect the dots, monitor what a member's, doing and seeing all their touch points across the brand or across your offering. I think we can all probably, put our hand on our heart and say, as programs, we've all fallen short of where we've been claiming to be over the last number of years. When it comes to, I don't want to use the buzzword personalization, but tailoring and personalizing relevant messages. We ingest a lot of data. We have access to a lot of data, whether it's first party, zero party, but we don't do the best job with it. What would be, if I was to, to kind of push you, if we sort of just accept that as a given and we go, okay, that's fine, we can stop beating our chest about it because we don't do a great job about it, but what can we do next? What can, programs think about, here's some low-hanging fruit, here's some good first steps to move forward in, as we move forward from where we are now?
There's got to be trust in technology, and I can say that as a CTO. The opportunity's there. We have more than enough data to do this. I think it's closing the loop with the interactions with the consumer as well. I often turn to companies that do a fantastic job. I know the word personalization has been around for a while, and we've talked about it doing it right. And I think if you really do personalization right, it's not noticeable to the end user. That consumer really has no idea that you're targeting them. I think Netflix does an amazing job of this, and I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but when you land on your homepage on Netflix, those titles that you see recommended to you kind of seems like that natural personalization. Okay, they're looking at my viewing habits. The next level of that is Netflix is using algorithms so that the artwork you're seeing and the titles that you see with that artwork are different for every person. So, David, you and I may want to see the same movie based on our viewing habits, but I'll see a different actor on the artwork as opposed to you based on my previous viewing habits. That's done through data. That's just done through usage patterns of ultimately their members on their site. And we've got the capabilities to do that. That technology exists either core in your programs themselves or with partners to do that. So we have sold ourselves short. I think we looked at this historical, let me collect some information and put people into buckets, but that's not enough. There was something on LinkedIn the other day, and it identified, and I'm gonna get this wrong, but it was born in the UK, in 1948, married twice, lives in a castle, and then they show the two pictures, and one is Prince Charles and the other is Ozzy Osbourne. So they meet the criteria if you were to look at that data you're ingesting, having the exact same data points, but I don't know either of them, but I'd argue two very different individuals. So that ability to connect with that user, you're not going to get it just on the data. You're going to have to understand how they interact with your program as well.
Yeah, I guess that brings the point of feedback from the member or feedback from the customer, and okay, Netflix can essentially automate that, and Amazon can automate that process based on your browsing habits, your viewing habits, what have you. They can A/B test, and get better at it. But when we think about, say, a travel program, and let's just pretend that we're meeting our high lofty ideals of personalizing our messages and making them more relevant, not bombarding, just carpet bombing our members' inboxes. Let's just say we're doing that. How can we do a better job as loyalty programs of incorporating that member feedback back into that loop so that we're continuously getting better? I mean, in an Amazon environment or a Netflix environment or an e-commerce environment, it's certainly much easier to do so because there's that real-time data of, I offer them, my Amazon home screen offers me 3 different products. I click on one, I don't click on 2. That's great feedback right then and there. But we don't really have that ability as easily in loyalty programs. What are some of the options that we can explore?
It's definitely more difficult. There's less touches. I think that's a given. So to suggest it would be as easy would be a misnomer. We find in our systems is asking more questions, but very, very simple questions, and then starting to collect that data. If you're sending out a survey for 15 answers, chances are your opt-in rate is going to be very low. But just connecting your system. So if you're an airline, is there a way that at the check-in counter you can ask a question and get that information into your system? Can I look at the habits of that consumer? Like everything that you can collect on a member can be valuable if you use it appropriately. So I would say it's definitely more difficult, but it's those simple questions you can ask, and if you can insert those into your different systems to ask that question to connect loyalty at the different terminals that are being used, whether it's check-in at the hotel, possibly the restaurants that they'd be going to on property. Each of those nuggets of information can lend itself to creating better personalization.
Let's layer in another dimension to it, which we started the conversation saying, hey, one of the big themes is this theme of the less frequent traveler, or the less frequent engaging member, even if you just want to break it down to that, because, hey, there are opportunities to engage, hopefully, that don't necessarily require travel, but when we're predominantly travel programs, less traveling means less engagement as a general rule. Keeping the theme of the discussion that we're having so far, but layering in this dimension of less frequent travelers, does that change the calculus? Does it change the strategy? Does it require different thinking that we haven't covered so far?
I think you've really got to look to partnerships. It got thrust on everybody. It was probably the natural evolution, but at a very key point in time, everybody stopped traveling. So now there was no other way to collect that data. The programs that we saw being successful were the ones that adapted very quickly and started creating partnerships and sending out messages. And it could have been everything from starting to earn and redeem your points in other locations. Joint messaging came out from some of the frequent flyer programs as well. For the sake of Mark, where is he? I'm an Aeroplan avid member. I think they did a great job as far as communicating to me as a member, even though I wasn't traveling for about 2 years there. So this is first flight out of the country. They did a fantastic job of creating new partnerships, evolving their program, and using that to collect data as well.
Partnerships is a tricky one, isn't it? But in the context of data, I mean, we've really seen an evolution of approach to partnerships over the years. Originally it was proprietary programs, and then we devolved perhaps into, I don't want to use the C word, but coalitions. And then we've moved on from that, where there's been this push back to proprietary programs. And a lot of that has been that coalitions really operated on the basis that you had one strong anchor tenant, and then you had other members of the coalition that really didn't have the resources or the capability to run proprietary programs on their own, so they piggybacked on somebody else's. Now, the more simplistic view of that is, hey, I'm the LCBO, I don't want to have my own proprietary program, so I'll just offer Aeroplan miles. It's the simplest proposition ever. Now, though, the barrier to entry to have your own proprietary program is incredibly low. So now that there is less of an imperative necessarily to partner or to get in bed with another brand to launch your program, where does the incentive come in? Say that we're two different potential partners, Len. I've got my own program now. Why do I need to bother partnering with you and sharing that data back to you?
It's the fundamentals of loyalty. It's a relationship. It's you give something to get something. And I think the more, I won't say advanced, the more confident programs out there are looking at partnership because they're comfortable in their skin. They know what they are, they know what they can offer, and they're comfortable with what they can offer. And I think if that's your kind of opening line to creating a partnership, then you can do a great job with that. The smaller programs have a lot to offer because if we start to talk about true personalization, it's not just Amazon. If you want to, enable your ability to use points at checkout, your members are looking for very specific things and creating, a number of different opportunities for them through different partnerships. Sometimes it's competing brands, but again, everyone is unique. Everyone has a very specific want, the essence of loyalty. So those partnerships are beneficial. Again, I'd say be confident in your brand and what you offer, and look for partnerships that will complement you and entice your member to interact with your brand more.
What about payments? Where does payments and perhaps payment? I don't want to limit ourselves to payment-linked offers, but just payments in generally. Where does that link in? We have a fintech panel later in the day. I know you'll be joining us for that. So perhaps we, if necessary, we can defer some of the discussion till then. But layering, again, just sort of building on the discussion so far, where do you see payments and loyalty fitting in together with that?
I think, as you know, this is core to our business. We see loyalty currency, whether it's miles, whether it's points, as a currency. We've always seen it this way. I think most of you running your program see it that way as well. It's another touch point. Loyalty early on, we all know the catalog days, or we should know those days, and then we moved to gift cards, and we disintermediated the member from your brand. So using it as a form of currency, a fiat currency that can be used directly at checkout, keeps that connection going now. So I think it's something we're advocates for. If we look at during the pandemic, how it was, as an airline or as a hotel chain, how did I keep that connection with that user? And it was, can I use my Aeroplan miles to purchase something, right? That's really helpful at that time. So that connection, that emotional connection back to the Air Canada brand and to the Aeroplan brand was there. This came across in a lot of programs. So I believe it's a payment vehicle. I think consumers today are very aware and very comfortable using alternative forms of payments. We hear a lot about the cryptocurrencies. There's too much volatility there. In my opinion, it's a wonderful thing to watch and to invest with and play around with. But as far as
entertainment,
this is probably a touchy subject, so I'll leave that one alone. But it is ultimately at that point, it's a vehicle to have some fun with. Loyalty currency is not. It's something that someone did something to earn, and they want to be able to use that currency. So it's definitely a fantastic payment vehicle. I'd argue, the buy now, pay later kind of wave that came in there. Loyalty should be part of that wave as a form of payment and checkout pretty much everywhere our consumers interacting.
How would you see? Let's talk about buy now, pay later. How would you envisage that loyalty, could really take advantage of that opportunity?
There's a number of opportunities. I know Amazon was at the forefront. Amex does a great job of this, but getting into that checkout process, if you can enable redemption today, and most programs do this, most programs offer redemption in a number of ways, not just core redemption, but through other partnerships, you've already got the rails to do this. So it's quite simple to enable redemption and possibly a return. And there's a number of partners out there. Shameless self-plug. Is it something we enable today through a network of allowing your members to use their points on a number of e-commerce sites around the world. So it's not difficult, again, as a technologist. These are simple things you can enable and then market around in your program.
As you've heard me say, plenty of times in the past, Len, I'm a loyalty behaviorist. I'm a 100% solid believer that the real currency of a loyalty program is its ability to change consumer behavior. How do you see in the data that you have exposure to, and obviously you spend a lot of time looking at, we can certainly take an exception for pandemic times if that's the oddball, but how do you see the increased use of payment-linked offers, payment opportunities? What are you seeing in terms of behavior bump from that?
So we've got a case study out through one of our major bank partners and a very large e-commerce retailer that we launched a program with just at the onset of the pandemic. So a little skewed, but the basket size increased by over 60% for people using points. The transaction volume increased as well. The burn from the loyalty program increased dramatically. So all the data points that you're looking to gain through your loyalty program, we saw a lift in all of those. And it didn't kind of tail off towards the end of the pandemic. We thought there would be an initial kind of halo effect to the pandemic, people using points for everyday purchases. And through this partnership, we were able to see basket information as well. And it wasn't just that, it was still aspirational things. They were just spending more, and they were still using the card product as well from the FI. So there wasn't any loss from the redemption side on the interchange fee that they would be earning as well. Those transactions were still happening. So all in all, really good data to support this.
Yeah, my crystal ball is as good as your crystal ball, but if we, again, we're going to come out of this at some point. Do things go back to normal as they were before? Perhaps, but we're a couple of years down the road with better technology and some investments that have taken place. Other times there hasn't been investments just because there's been constraints. Do we feel? Let me rephrase the question. Should programs be thinking that their members are going to pick up where they left off? Or do programs really need to be thinking this is a completely new paradigm shift and we need to be starting from scratch and revisiting all of our pre-existing strategic assumptions? It's open-ended, sorry.
No, it's a fair question. I don't think everyone needs to start over. I think people were at different phases in reinvigorating their programs. So to say they have to start over is probably not a great statement. Probably freak out a lot of CFOs around the table if they were looking for that investment as well. What the pandemic did, in my opinion, is accelerate a lot of the ideas that people already had or some of the concepts they were thinking about implementing and giving you the freedom to do so. You were operating in a new world where it was okay to fail, it was okay to try things. We had consumers, not interacting as much with the core offerings of the brands, specifically to this conference, the hotels and the airlines. So they gave them that opportunity to kind of take a step back, reset, and it is the new normal. Like the new normal is never really normal. We're always changing, we're always evolving. I think this just accelerated that. So I don't see us going back to what we were pre-pandemic. I think this converges back to people will start to travel again. They'll get comfortable with that. They'll use hotels again, not just through business, personally as well. And it's how do these two interconnect to create this new normal and then continue to evolve? So
final questions before we finish up. Thinking about the transactional data that you've been looking at, it's very interesting. Your previous comment about you thought there was going to be that halo and then drop off. But if we were to go back to one of our earlier questions of infrequent travelers versus who was our bread and butter beforehand, have you seen a difference or any interesting insights in terms of that card spend, that usage, between who we would have perhaps have considered before our bread and butter high value travelers, members, versus the less frequent ones?
I think the pattern stayed the same, to be quite honest with you. What we did see is engagement definitely increased. So we talk about that shift of moving everyone up the chain a little bit. We did see a bit of that, and it was accelerated by this. But behaviorally, we saw the same patterns that we saw before, just accelerated, to be honest with you.
Interesting. Well, I mean, that's good news in the sense that I know a lot of programs have been struggling with the basis that who they previously considered to be their bread and butter, their engagement has dropped off, but it seems that in the other avenues of engagement, at least what you're seeing is that it's continued to be there.
It's continued to be there. Again, we're on the FI side a lot more, so the co-brand cards, those types of things, that's where we saw this.